There is a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being without people. It comes from being severed from something ancient, something you were never taught to name. You feel it not just in your thoughts, but in your chest, your stomach, the weight behind your eyes, a hollow ache in the ribs, a restless energy in the fingertips. It's not the absence of company that hurts. It's the presence of a silence so old it feels ancestral, a sorrow that lives beneath your story. You wake with it. You carry it through your day. You try to outrun it with connection, with busyness, with meaning, but it returns. Not louder, just deeper. And sometimes it feels as if you're carrying the loneliness of all humankind, folded into your own. Carl Jung, the depth psychologist who spent his life mapping the inner world, was fascinated by the unconscious, by archetypes, by the shadow, and by the hidden architecture of the soul. He understood something most of his peers never dared to explore, that some of the pain we carry isn't personal. It's not just from our childhood, our breakups, or our traumas. It's older, far older. A sorrow passed down like a hidden inheritance, a grief as ancient as humankind itself. Jung believed that we carry within us a vast invisible reservoir, not just of instincts, but of memories, symbols, and psychic fragments from those who came before us. He called it the collective unconscious, a deeper layer of reality that binds all souls through archetype and memory. And as Jung once said, in each of us there is another whom we do not know. They speak to us in dreams and tell us how differently they see us. It's not just your loneliness. It's a message from the part of you that remembers everything, long before you had a name for any of this. This video will serve as your quiet map through that territory, a guide to the kind of loneliness that doesn't begin in your lifetime, but still lives inside you. We'll explore why it lingers, why it deepens, and what sacred mission it may be silently preparing you for. By the end, you may not only recognize it, you may begin to hear what it's been asking of you all along. Stay with me. And if this already feels like something your soul was meant to hear, subscribe now. There's more waiting for you here than just answers. There's recognition, resonance, and the beginning of return. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Ache Beneath the Ache. There's the loneliness that comes from loss, an ended relationship, a death, a move, a betrayal, and then there's the other kind, the one with no clear beginning, no breakup, no funeral, no exile. Just the slow, quiet heaviness of not belonging to this world. The ache that lingers beneath every version of your life, no matter how full. Carl Jung once described it as the suffering of the soul that has not yet recognized itself. But what if it's more than that? What if your loneliness isn't simply yours, but something older, an echo that began generations before you? What if it's your grandmother's silence that you wake with in your chest, your father's buried grief that rises through your breath, the ache of ancestors who never found the space to feel? Perhaps you've always felt a disproportionate sadness at the sight of old, abandoned houses, a pang that felt deeper than simple empathy. What if that's the echo of an ancestor who lost their home, and that feeling now stirs in your own chest? Because you may not remember the moment it entered you. That's because it didn't. You were born into it, into a family, a culture, a system that had long ago severed its own emotional truth. And so the loneliness you carry is not a failure to connect. It is the residue of lifetimes where connection was too dangerous. Think of your ancestors, those who had to flee to survive, to numb, to obey. They didn't have time to feel. They couldn't afford the luxury of reflection. And so their soul material, their pain, their longing, their wonder went underground. But the soul doesn't forget. What isn't integrated doesn't vanish, it descends into the unconscious, into the body, into you. We inherit more than eye color and bone shape. We inherit unfinished emotional stories, suppressed grief, aborted dreams, forgotten rituals, and the hollowed silence of exile. Carl Jung taught us that these fragments don't disappear. He believed we carry within us more than our biography. We carry the entire spiritual heritage of our species. The collective unconscious, he wrote, contains the whole spiritual heritage of mankind's evolution, born anew in the brain structure of every individual. And not only that, he warned us that what our ancestors leave unlived doesn't simply dissolve, it reappears. Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. This isn't just the shadow of one family. It's the sorrow of generations, the weight of unlived lives, the soul memory of humanity itself, choosing you to remember. The question then is not just, has your soul recognized itself, but is it possible that opening the door to inherited sorrow is the hidden passage to that recognition? Jung may not have asked it this way, but I will. What if the emotional debt of your lineage is not a burden, but a sacred responsibility? What if your loneliness is not exile from others, but exile from a forgotten part of yourself, wrapped in ancestral memory? This kind of loneliness doesn't come from disconnection with people. It comes from being the one asked to feel what others could not. As Jung once wrote, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. Because what aches in you isn't just the absence of others, it's the weight of what has never been spoken, never been shared, never been received. The soul doesn't just long for connection, it longs to be seen in its depth, and to offer that depth without fear. And maybe, just maybe, that's the beginning of return. Chapter 2. The Sacred Role of the Lonely One. There's a reason you feel it more than others. Why the silence echoes louder in you. Why some walk through life untouched by the ache, while you carry it like a second skin, porous to things they can't even name. You weren't built to be harder, you were built to be open. And that openness isn't weakness. It's a deeper kind of strength. A sensitivity fierce enough to register the whispers others learn to ignore. Carl Jung spoke often of those whose inner orientation makes them strangers to the surface world. Souls and personalities shaped by introverted feeling or introverted intuition. These quiet functions do not grasp truth through logic or sensation, but through mood, symbolic resonance, and deep unconscious pattern. They are the ones who often see too much and are seen too little. The ones whose loneliness isn't accidental, it's structural. But this isn't misfortune. It's initiation. The lonely one is often the one chosen to remember, to feel what others buried, to make soul out of what generations suppressed. You weren't born to repeat their silence. You were born to transmute it, not by shouting, not by fixing, but by staying. By becoming the first in your line not to flinch when the pain surfaces. You break the chain not through rebellion, but through reverence, through the quiet courage of presence. And from that presence, a different kind of strength is born. Not the hardened bravado taught by culture, the one that says don't care, don't feel, don't break. But a strength shaped by integration, a soul strength, the kind that emerges only when you have not only faced your pain, but metabolized the pain of those who came before you. And slowly, you begin to see the world differently, through a gravity that renders the noise of the world small, and the soul's quiet architecture vast enough to hold it all. And yes, this path often comes with exile, with the kind of solitude that doesn't just surround you, but reconstructs you. It demands descent into your own shadow, into theirs, into the underworld of the forgotten. But Jung reminds us, only the wounded physician heals. Your ache is not your failure, it is your passage. The soul does not entrust this kind of grief to the unready. It chooses the ones who can survive the fire without turning to ash. So perhaps the real question is not, why am I so sensitive? But what sacred materials am I carrying for those who could not bear them? And when you begin to ask that, you are no longer the wound. You are the alchemist, the healer, the one who incarnates the silent prophecy of the ancestors that someone someday would come to carry it all the way to light so they may finally go in peace. Chapter 3. The Collective Unconscious and the Forgotten Soul. Let us return to the collective unconscious, not as concept but as reality. Carl Jung did not imagine the psyche as a self-contained chamber locked inside the skull. He saw it as an organ of participation, one thread in the vast inner web of the cosmos. The collective unconscious, for him, was not poetic metaphor, but ontological fact. A deep, inherited field of symbolic memory, instinct and archetype that pulses beneath the surface of every soul. It is the psychic soil from which myths emerge, from which spiritual longing awakens, and through which ancestral suffering is transmitted. And so your loneliness, yes, even the kind that seems without cause, may not be yours alone. When you feel the ache of separation, you are not merely isolated from others. You are touching the fracture of the species, the split between soul and world, myth and machine, earth and ego. You are sensing the amnesia of a civilization that has forgotten how to bow, how to feel, how to descend. In a world of distraction and disembodiment, your loneliness is not pathology. It is signal. It is the thread that has not been severed. Jung once wrote, "The world hangs on a thin thread, and that thread is the psyche of man." But what if the psyche itself depends on the sensitivity of the few who still remember? Perhaps you were never meant to escape the ache, but to listen to it. Not to numb it, but to become the vessel through which it turns back toward wholeness. In you, the forgotten soul remembers itself. Chapter 4. The body remembers what the mind forgot. But even that is not the end, because what the conscious mind represses, the unconscious does not forget, and what the unconscious cannot hold, it sends to the body. The mind is clever in its defenses. It dissociates, rationalizes, rewrites history to protect the self-image. But the body speaks in a more ancient tongue. It remembers without narrative. It remembers through sensation, tightness, fatigue, pain with no cause and grief with no name. That knot in your stomach when you're alone, that hollow in your chest after joy retreats too soon, that heavy ache behind your eyes at twilight. These are not random disturbances, they are echoes, soul signals, messages from a deeper lineage, from a sorrow not yet metabolized. Jung believed that when the ego refuses to listen, the unconscious erupts into the body, forcing what was hidden into form. In his language, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. And so your symptom may not be a flaw but a buried ceremony, a grief your ancestors swallowed, a cry that was never released, a truth that no one dared to name until you. When the soul's memory becomes too great to stay below, it does not rise as language. It rises as flesh. And you, the sensitive one, were born not just to survive this, but to feel it, to carry it, to translate it, not into pathology, but into presence. Because you are not just a person. You are a remembering instrument. And the ache in your body may be the music of something sacred trying to return. If this touched something ancient in you, subscribe. And consider sharing a quiet moment of reflection in the comments below. Chapter 5. Loneliness as initiation, not punishment. So now you can see it. Loneliness is not just exile, but entrance. Not a punishment, but a preparation. What you're walking through may feel like silence, abandonment, or even collapse. But symbolically, it mirrors what is often called the dark night of the soul, and what Carl Jung described as the necessary descent into symbolic death. A phase that strips everything false, everything borrowed, everything performative, until only the real remains. Jung believed that all true transformation begins with the death of the ego. The roles vanish, the attachments fall, and even the outer gods grow silent. And that's exactly what soul loneliness mimics, a falling away of belonging, a freefall into darkness, a dismembering of everything you thought made you lovable. But within that darkness, something ancient begins to stir, a subtle pulse from below the surface, a voice not loud, not comforting, but real. At first it whispers, then it asks, then it commands, and you realize the loneliness was never just absence, it was preparation. Not a void, but a womb, a secret place of gestation, a return to psychic soil where only what is true can take root. The pain didn't exile you, it initiated you, into yourself. And when the ego has burned away just enough for the psyche to glimpse what lies beneath, something shifts. The very solitude that once felt unbearable begins to glow with sacredness, because it no longer speaks in the voice of loss, but in the voice of the self. Not the persona you built to survive, not the ego that begged for approval, but the quiet center that was waiting for everything else to fall. As Jung wrote, to the extent that the ego is willing to abdicate its power, the self steps in and fills the vacuum. You were never truly alone. You were being summoned inward. Chapter 6. Soul Memory and the Return to Origin. If the soul carries memory, then it also carries longing. And the deepest longing is not for a partner or even a purpose, but for origin, for reunion with the source of meaning, the sacred, the whole. The loneliness you carry may not be about what's missing in this life, but what was remembered from before it. A silence too ancient to explain, yet too precise to deny. Carl Jung called this the archetype of the self, the inner image of completeness that lives in every soul, a magnet not toward another person, but toward the center of your own becoming. So when you feel alone, it's not simply because you are far from others. It's because you are far from that center, from the remembered temple, the forgotten home, the inner axis that once aligned you with the eternal. And here lies the paradox. You could not begin the journey home until you were exiled from everywhere else. You had to lose your place in the world to find your place in the soul. Loneliness, then, is not the opposite of connection. It is the hidden path to sacred reconnection, not outward first, but inward, toward the part of you that was never broken, never abandoned, never lost, only buried, only waiting. And when you return to it, even for a moment, you remember that what you've been searching for was never truly gone. It was simply waiting for your silence to deepen. Final chapter, the loneliness that leads you back to yourself. There are no easy answers for the one who feels old grief in young bones. There is no shortcut through the valley of soul memory. But there is a deeper truth. You are not carrying this ache because you are weak. You are carrying it because you are ready. Ready to remember what others forgot. Ready to feel what others suppressed. Ready to come home, not to a person, but to the part of your soul that was never truly lost. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And sometimes that becoming begins not with love, but with absence. Not with clarity, but with ache. The loneliness you carry isn't yours alone. It's the memory of what your lineage never named. It's the echo of your soul before it was dulled. And it may hurt, but it is sacred. Because it's not leading you away from life, it's leading you deeper into it. And here's the question. What if this ache is not a flaw but a message? What if you are not collapsing but being summoned? What if the ache you carry is not random, not personal, not weakness, but a call sent by the universe itself? A signal that you've reached the precise threshold where your soul and the cosmos align, what Jung called synchronicity, the mysterious moment when the outer world mirrors the inner readiness of your being, not coincidence, not fate, but meaning revealed through pain. You weren't assigned this sorrow by accident. You were chosen to carry a piece of the collective forgetting, so you could remember. And through that ache, through that silence, through that unbearable space, you are not breaking down. You are being led, and you are not alone. This isn't a journey of striving, it's a quiet return. A descent into the forgotten room of your soul, where the ache waits not to be silenced but seen. Not to be healed by force, but slowly gathered, like fragments of a story your lineage left unfinished. This is the sacred work. Not to become more, but to remember what has always lived beneath the surface. If your loneliness feels older than your life, share it below. Your words may help someone else remember. Subscribe. Pass it to someone carrying a sorrow they never learned to name. And return here, whenever you need to remember what was never meant to be carried alone. Thank you for watching. Until we meet again, take care.